First of all, since I'm on the tails of the Liquidsoap folks, big thank you to both of them for their superlative work over the years on this project. I know open source can be thankless work, and so it's I want to say it out loud. Thank you very much for all of your hard work. So sorry, no webcam for me. I look COVID fabulous today, so we're doing everyone in the chat a favor here. But hello to everybody. My name is Buster Neece. I am the lead developer, creator, and voice of the error message of AzuraCast. It's a labor of love of mine that I've been working on for the better part of 6 years now, 5 going on 6 years. And I wanted to talk about what we do, what our role is in the ecosystem of web radio, and also how we interact with Liquidsoap and what we've learned in the time that we've been using it. So let's just dive right in. First off, a little bit about me. So my name is Buster Neece, and yes, Buster is actually my real name. A lot of people ask me that. Not a nickname. It's not short for anything else. I'm actually not all that fond of it. You get teased a lot when you're young if you're named Buster. The reason I go by Buster Silver Eagle Neece in quotes is because I've had that screen name for as long as almost as I've had my real name for the better part of 16 years at this point. So there's so many people who call me that I answer to both. And I have both on my profiles and everything else, so you can just call me whatever. I consider myself a full stack web applications developer. I've been working as a developer in some capacity for the better part of 22 years now. My specialty has been PHP. Back in the day, it was personal homepage when I first started with it, but nowadays it's today's modern PHP 8.0, 8.1, and it's a whole different world. And I also do a lot of front end work, especially Vue.js lately. If you've seen AzuraCast, we've moved a lot of things over to Vue.js as I have fallen in love with it for the front end. And I think a lot of you who have used it can probably share that sentiment. And I'm a member of a lot of online fan communities. And so if you look on the right there, that's my fursona. I'm not going to get into what that is in this talk, but look it up sometime. I'm in a lot of fan communities, and so that's where the whole Silver Eagle thing comes from, and that's why a lot of people call me that. It's also how I got into broadcasting. So back in 2012, I got into a small community that did a broadcasting in a special fan community, which we'll get into in just a moment. But I was actually there as a DJ and a presenter, kind of a radio voice. And they said, oh, we also need a web developer. So I ended up doing web development. And the long and short of that was the eventual creation of AzuraCast. So AzuraCast, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, is a free and open source, self-hosted web radio station in a box, basically, is how we advertise it. So our goal with AzuraCast is to abstract out a lot of the technical concerns and basically deliver to our users a fully free and open source from top to bottom web application that lets them manage their web radio station, that lets them manage their media, playlists, DJs, do reports, do analytics, and everything else out of the box, completely free of charge on whatever hardware they want. And to really lower the barriers to entry, not only in terms of cost, in delivering a free and open source piece of software, but also in terms of technical knowledge. We implement these complex things. We write the IceCast configuration, the Liquidsoap configuration under the hood, and really all you have to worry about is just the web UI. And that's the other part of AzuraCast. So, not only do we have the installers to build and put everything together and build our Docker images, which is our main deployment method, but we also then wrap all of that in a web UI that we also build and maintain ourselves. It's a PHP-backed web application, and it uses a Vue.js front end. So that's kind of the long and short of that. So before AzuraCast existed, The project I was working on was a open source project still. It was called Ponyville Live. It was for the My Little Pony fan community. And if you go back there and you see that unicorn that we have everywhere, that's a little love letter back to our roots in the community. If you've ever wondered why our login page has a giant unicorn on it, well, that's the answer to the question. AzuraCast is a direct product of the My Little Pony fan community. It was a big thing back around 2010. It's not such a big thing now. I'm not even really a big part of it at all anymore, but it was the community that um, that inspired us to build an application that originally just sat on top of Centovacast. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's another piece of software that bears somewhat of a resemblance to what AzuraCast is today, but it is a commercial closed source piece of software. It is PHP, but it's encoded PHP. You can't really play with it. And what we did is we just treated that like a black box and then just consumed the API, converted it into our own unified format across all of the stations, and then served that via our own API. And at some point, someone told us, hey, that's actually so useful that you should just make that a piece of software and add in radio management so that you're actually originating the broadcast directly. And so that's exactly what we did back in early 2016 is we took this abstraction and we took it one step further. We took it away from being our fan specific project and we said any radio station can use this and we'll just build it as controlling the entire web radio station process from start to finish, basically. So, this is what the public player of AzuraCast looks like today. It's not what everyone's public player looks like, but part of what I wanted to demonstrate here is that there are customizations built into the software. Things like custom backgrounds. In this case, you can set the album art to be your custom background, and so it updates as the current playing track updates, for example. But this is one of the more popular things we build in is public players. You can embed a player directly from AzuraCast, and it includes all the playback, what's playing, what's your song requests, song history, things like that, all out of the box. Zero coding required. So that's a big advantage. A lot of stations take advantage of that. And this is what our control panel looks like. So this is the profile of a station. It gives you a wealth of information about what's currently playing, what's going to be coming up, what's on the schedule. And don't worry about, these are all local passwords. Don't worry about that. They're not important. But it gives you, a rundown of all of your mount points, which is, where you broadcast on the server and any remote relays if you're relaying off the server. And you can see here kind of a quick rundown of basically what you can manage in each given station. So, playlists, we have a new podcast feature we're rolling out. You can authenticate streamers and create custom streamer accounts that then they broadcast into the auto DJ, and it interrupts the auto DJ to broadcast a live signal. That's all possible. We even have a web DJ that's actually a fork of a piece of software that's managed that was actually built by the Liquidsoap folks, webcaster. We also have management for mount points, remote relays. We have webhooks built in. That's another cool thing that anytime certain things trigger, like if a song changes or if you gain listeners, lose listeners, a DJ connects or disconnects, it can fire off a webhook at, and that can be a Twitter post or a URL or any other kind of thing. So that's kind of a quick look at what AzuraCast is today. Under the hood, this is a quick image of what our application infrastructure looks like. And if you look at this in the big picture, if you look at the big squares, those are the Docker containers. So our primary method of distributing AzuraCast, and this is to both reduce complexity for our end users, to reduce the amount of maintenance headaches that they have, but also to make it so that every installation of AzuraCast, and there are tens of thousands of them out there now, every installation is consistent, that it has the same software built in the exact same way, interacting and located in the same spots with all the same known factors, and everything connects to each other in a way that we can predict and isn't interfered with by other pieces of software. So that's largely why we deploy using Docker primarily, although it is, as the chat is apparently discussing, not required that you use Docker. A lot of people are very afraid of that, and don't be. You don't need to use Docker if you want to. We also have installation scripts for traditional installation via Ansible. But yeah, here's a rundown of kind of our basic infrastructure. So we have our web container, which is an Nginx web server in PHP. These days it's PHP 8.1. It's usually whatever the latest version is. We have excuse me. We have MariaDB container. That's our database. MariaDB is a fork of MySQL. We have Redis, which manages our sessions. It manages caches. It just helps improve our performance overall. And we have our stations container, where Supervisor D is another application. It's a Python application. And that manages each station's individual processes. So it manages the back end, the auto DJ, which in this case is Liquidsoap, and whatever broadcasting front end they choose. So they can choose either IceCast or Shoutcast. So, like we said earlier, we don't we ship 100% free and open source software, and Shoutcast is not free and open source software. So, if you want to install that with AzuraCast, you have to kind of bring it yourself a little bit. So, it's a we offer an interface where you can drag and drop the binary from Shoutcast's website, but we don't ship it with our software, because we want to maintain a fully free and open source piece of software. So what we do ship and what we do recommend is IceCast. We specifically ship a fork of it that is IceCast KH, maintained by Carl Hayes. It has a lot of improvements, especially with regards to reporting and handling proxies and things like that. And yeah, AzuraCast has a big advantage, is 100% free and open source software, the full stack. And sorry, one moment. I've got a bit of a cough here, so one moment. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, everything we install is 100% free and open source software. We want to support the open source ecosystem that we're a part of, and so our full stack is completely open source, and our own software is licensed via the Apache license, and there are a number of different licenses that apply to the upstream software, as it were. So now, why did we use Liquidsoap? It is a pretty easy answer, honestly. For one, when we were choosing a piece of software for our auto DJ at the time, so this is 2016, there was just no suitable alternative. And today, even, there's almost no suitable alternative. The alternatives are either closed sourced, or they're oversimplified in that they only offer, a playing next functionality, right? You just give it what to play and it spits out a broadcast signal. So those are things like Easy Stream or, Shoutcast's own built-in auto DJ. And those didn't do the trick for us. And then there's also more complicated radio automation software, but that was too much. We wanted something kind of in the middle, and Liquidsoap fits the bill perfectly then and now. And Liquidsoap offers full control of the broadcasting life cycles, scheduling outputs. All of that is all via a single script. That what we can do, and what we do with AzuraCast, is we just automatically generate it based on all the contents of our databases. So you build a playlist in AzuraCast, it converts into a line of Liquidsoap configuration, and it runs without any issues. So that's possible. It makes it possible for us to basically write code for you. and then have that code transition into a radio station. And another nice thing is, of course, that it supports incoming connections for DJs and streamers, which means that we didn't have to be in the business of, this is especially important for us because we allow both IceCast and Shoutcast broadcasting front ends, and those involve different tools that can, so different DJ software can connect to one but not connect to the other. And this kind of abstracts that all out. And it makes it so that it's not as much of a concern. You just connect to the Liquidsoap backend. Liquidsoap automatically fades, the current song that's playing, kicks over to the auto DJ, and in our case, also even records broadcasts. This is another thing we support, that it can output those broadcasts as a separate file, which we then catalog inside of our system, which is super cool. And all of that is possible via Liquidsoap. So how we use Liquidsoap, a lot of people, if you're building Liquidsoap, there's a lot of different suggestions on how we do it. We do it two different ways. We support nowadays, the very latest version of AzuraCast has support for ARM64, which are your Raspberry Pis and other sort of devices. Well, your newer Raspberry Pis, there's a lot of 64-bit ARM devices out there, but that's kind of the biggest one a lot of people ask us about is Raspberry Pis. So for AMD 64 and on the traditional or Ansible installation 1804, we use OPAM, which means we're building it basically from source and we're compiling it. That process takes anywhere from 15 minutes on a good computer, 10 minutes on a good computer, for the specific combination of different little Liquidsoap thingies that we use, to 45 minutes on a less competent machine like a Raspberry Pi, which is why for our ARM devices, we use Debian packages. So Liquidsoap has been so kind lately in the newest version to start actually building Debian packages out of the box. And since, we're on primarily Ubuntu as our main Linux OS, Debian packages are super easy for us to drop in, zero compilation work, and those install a whole lot faster. And so we use that. We automatically, like I said, we generate configuration from playlists and streamer info, and we build together a Liquidsoap config file. And we actually, for each station, only have one single giant Liquidsoap config file that gets spit out. The reason for that, we could abstract that out into a dozen little smaller files, but the reason for that is if we need to debug anything, what we can do is we can ask our users, hey, can you copy and paste the generated file that our system spits out and what we're sending to Liquidsoap, you copy and paste that whole file and send it to us all at once, and then that lets us see any possible problems all in one spot. Super convenient, and there's no other assumption. So what you see on that script is really what's running the radio station, and it's a longer script as a result, but really, it's still very concise in the big picture. For considering the complexity of what you're doing, it's really quite concise. And to support that, we have a web UI for our power users. So rather than just automatically generating, sorry, I'm trying to read the chat and talk. I'll get to the chat's questions in the next talk. I think I'll just go back and answer those. The Liquidsoap configuration that we automatically generate, if you look at, like for example, this page, this is our edit custom Liquidsoap config. What we do is we define little blocks where you can inject your own custom Liquidsoap code. And this, you can take advantage of all the variables and functions and things that we define along, inside the code, but then you can inject your own custom code at various points. We put it at the most critical points in the system. So, right before broadcasting, right after fading, right before defining all the playlists in this case, all of the most critical points are spots that you can then inject your own custom code. And then that custom code gets added in, and when we render the final Liquidsoap script, it gets included. So that's, a very excellent feature for power users. A lot of people use that for custom processing, custom script, or scheduling of playlists, a lot of different things like that. So we've been doing this now for 5 years. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was a little bit of what we've learned along the process. And I think a lot of you, and especially the Liquidsoap team, can sympathize with some of these things. Number one, what we learned about being built upon Liquidsoap. And the biggest thing is that when you're built on a different piece of software, when you're built on an upstream piece of software that manages a very core piece of functionality for your application, you kind of get in the business when you're providing support of not just triaging, is this something that's a priority for me, but is this a me problem? And 99% of our problems nowadays are kind of mixed. It's like, well, this may be a me problem. This may be an AzuraCast issue, and it may be a Liquidsoap issue. It may be a PHP issue. It may be our web server's configuration or Docker, or maybe, there's so many upstream pieces of software that a lot of what we do when we provide support to our users is simply trying to determine who can fix it. Whether that's us or whether that's someone else. And so, yeah, there's a huge amount of overlap of who fixes what. Since the auto DJ, a lot of people have questions. Which portion does AzuraCast manage in terms of scheduling? Which portion does Liquidsoap manage? And that's the answer to that. By the way, the reason I didn't mention it here is because it depends. There are multiple configuration options in AzuraCast where you can change configuration so that Liquidsoap manages more or less of that process. So you can either hand over full control over it, which is called manual auto DJ mode, or you can let us manage everything. And then that gives you features like, what's playing next, a longer song queue, things like that. And we do have somewhat different development styles. That's we're not super different. I mean, of course, the one big thing is that OCaml is sort of a functional language, and the Liquidsoap scripting language inherits a lot of that. And we're PHP developers, and a lot of this, a lot of the syntax of the Liquidsoap language, and don't be upset if you're new to this and it all is a foreign concept to you. I've been building AzuraCast for 5 years, and it is a foreign concept to me sometimes. Just because I'm a different, my engineer brain works in a slightly different way than kind of functional languages tend to work. And so, I defer to the experts. That's where the Liquidsoap maintainers come in, and I'm very grateful for them, because otherwise I would have no idea what to do with it myself. We do have, a similar release cadence in that we have, rolling release updates with tagged stable versions that follow a semantic versioning. And the other big thing we have in common is what they call in open source the stadium arrangement, which is a stadium is where there's 30,000 people standing, around you, and then there's two people in the middle. And the two people in the middle are the maintainers of the project, and all the weight of the project and all the hype of everyone around you is all focused on those two people in the middle. And the pressure can be very high. There's a risk reward to it where you can also be a superstar, because that's what's a lot of the time is in a stadium, right? Is a superstar in the middle. And it gives you that possibility. It also can be overwhelming. And I very, very much sympathize with that arrangement. We have a very similar one. I have another developer who helps me out a lot, and we have a community moderator who helps me out a lot. They're both here in the chat, and hello to them. That's it. That's really it. We have community, we have people who translate. We have other contributors, of course, but none that rise to that same level. We're very much a stadium, quote unquote, arrangement where it's a very small group of us in the middle, and everyone out else is kind of watching us and either cheering us on or in some cases cursing us out. I don't know. Don't really understand that. So, our most impactful tech decisions, I only have 5 minutes here, so I'll kind of blow through these. One was picking Docker as our primary deployment method. That's been evident just from the chat, that was a pretty controversial decision. Although the reason we did it is from the last slide, right? Which is because there's 3 of us. And if there's only 3 of us, we want to have the most predictable and simple and straightforward deployment as we possibly can if we want to have 30,000 installations out there running AzuraCast that 3 people can support. That's, we need the most kind of streamlined setup, and Docker delivers that to us. We have, the fact that we're built on modern PHP means we have 100 composer package dependencies. Those are PHP libraries that we depend on. 50 more front-end dependencies for Vue.js, NPM, etc. And a huge percentage of our time is spent swimming through all the little updates that come down, right? There's little updates to PHP packages, and some developer decided they wanted to change something. Why? Well, for change's sake. They wanted to change something just because it's fun to change things. And that means that we have to refactor some big portion of our application. A huge percentage of our time has been spent doing that. Being and staying open source has been very difficult for us. We are a labor of love, and we do want to continue to be a no cost barrier to entry, something the whole community can enjoy, that's accessible and inclusive. That's a big thing. For one of my very proudest things is that AzuraCast is used a lot in the visually impaired community. I talk about that 100, I'll sing that from the rooftops. It's a huge deal for me, and I'm very, very proud of that, that we're considered accessible enough that this whole community considers us their, one of their foremost pieces of software. All the same, it is hard being end user facing open source software. And by that, I mean, Liquidsoap has a different audience than AzuraCast has. AzuraCast audience, since we mean to remove a lot of the technical complexity, we also remove the barriers where the people on GitHub are other developers, right? Our audience is not other developers. It would be nice if our audience was 30,000 other developers, because then we'd get some help. But it's not. It's end users. And a lot of the time, we are the first time they've ever had to file a GitHub issue. And they're not always nice about it. And they're not always understanding or patient or respectful or sharing in the sense of urgency that I have, for whatever problem they have, because after all, their station is a number one priority to them. And so it sort of becomes one for us as well. The other thing, and just in one big word there, sustainability is a big problem for open source software. For us, it means paying the bills. It means building AzuraCast is not real possible when you're starving. And it's not that I do AzuraCast for the money. I absolutely don't. I do it as a labor of love to deliver something to the public, to keep myself sharp in times when I otherwise wouldn't be working. There's so many reasons that I work on it, and it isn't for the money, but it would be nice to not have to worry. We have donations that come in through Patreon, through GitHub sponsors, through Ko-fi, PayPal, Stripe, etc. And all together, the total of our donations still falls below the federal poverty level for even a single person. It doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't, it's not great. It's better than it used to be, and I'm very grateful to all of our supporters. But sustaining open source is still an ongoing discussion that we need to have, because software like this, with this many users, with companies reselling it, people out there making money off of the back of things like AzuraCast, and not really giving back necessarily. Something's got to change there, right? We need to have that discussion. I'm just going to skip this whole section. These are things we tried to do to sustain our project as an open source project, and it didn't necessarily go as well. And you can read a whole thread about that over on our GitHub's issue sections. But I want to thank everybody. I realize I just hit the 30-minute mark. I didn't quite time myself all that well, but I would be happy to discuss things in the chat, and happy to discuss things on our Discord, discord.gg/AzuraCast. Feel free to join us there and ask us questions. Thank you all for your time. And sorry, I kind of rushed everything a little bit. I'm nervous. What can I say? But thank you again to the Liquidsoap folks.
Thanks a lot for your talk. It was very nice. I think we still have time for one or two questions if you want to ask. We are not like that timely. So if there is a question which needs to be answered. Okay. So if not, thank you again. We had lively discussions, and of course we can.
One thing I wanted to say is I know that it's difficult to debug, and we're trying to step in more visual, because every time that we get feedback, it also helps us fix the software. And so thank you for that. And we're gonna try to be more diligent working visual upstream to fix issues. And also, we've tried for the last release to time our release with preview and debugging from the upstream users, so that when the version comes out, we've actually at least tested it to some extent visual, you know. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it was excellent to work with y'all on the 2.0 release. The collaboration there was spectacular, and the way that you all have been dedicated to getting bugs fixed since then, and even today and in the last couple of weeks, has been much appreciated. Absolutely.
Hey Buster, if I may add a question here. I asked it in the chat, but I wondered, maybe you don't know the answer to that, but do you rely on Liquidsoap for all the metadata and cover art and stuff in the tracks, or do you have special media ingestion? I will call it that way, for AzuraCast. It's been a while since I've read on whatever you've been doing there, so.
This is actually a really good question. Liquidsoap is capable of managing all of the metadata itself and passing it back to us. The big problem is that the eternal struggle we've always had is when you pull IceCast or Shoutcast and you say, hey, what's playing? What do they give us back? They give us title and artist. That's it. That's all they've ever given us. I wish they gave us the huge wealth of metadata that Liquid Data has, and if I could ever, or Liquidsoap has, and if I could ever coerce it into happening, and if anyone has any tips on how to coerce it into happening, please let me know, because that's
unless you actually do OGG or something else, it won't happen in MP3 because nobody ever described how the metadata could get to the end. But I'm not like restricting this to IceCast. I'm like, you've got a nice player going on, and that's really important. And you can display whatever info you want, and we can extract that from Liquidsoap if we want to. But my question was more like, do you do your own ingestion about the media so that you can get your info, or do you rely on Liquid?
We do. We manage our own metadata database. That's a fun word.
Yes.
So like album art and the richer metadata, like custom fields associated with each piece of media, we have our own separate database that manages that. What we do whenever we detect a song playing is we try to turn back around and match it with our internal database so that we can deliver the album art, things like that. That's been a difficult process. If it was just Liquidsoap doing it, we'd have 100% success rate because we could just get our annotations back. Basically, what we do is we annotate to Liquidsoap. Here's our huge string of metadata and everything that's playing in a long annotation stream, and then they play that. If we use that, we'd be 100% accurate, but the title and artist that we get from IceCast or Shoutcast is much less.
Oh yeah, you don't want to use that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Okay. Well, I might dive back in the project. I've kind of left it alone for like 2 years or so, but I like what you're doing, and I hope that can go somewhere further. Yeah. Maybe I can dive in. Someone asked a question that didn't get an answer. I think it was about video support. I'm not actually interested in that, but I saw that it was being asked in the chat.
2 different levels of video support. So short answer, video support as in like adding a video stream on top of your radio stream, something that we're already working on. Thanks to Liquidsoap2, it's much easier and very possible to do. And we'll be doing that with FFmpeg, overlaying a video stream, like a looping background, sort of, like the music to chill and relax to on YouTube, those kinds of things. It'll be like one of those. That will be in AzuraCast very shortly. The actual like managing video, the way that you do audio, is about 10 times more computationally expensive. So temper your expectations on that, by the way. Processing audio is extremely easy. Processing video is not nearly as much. But maybe in the future.